in the UK, you'll know that earwax removal has been completely stopped on the NHS GP system. I'll tell you why that is, although I might get banned for it. So there's always these rumours going around that earwax removal got removed from GP surgeries because it was deemed as unsafe. That's not true. GP surgeries are no longer NHS funded. Well, not completely anyway. Now, I want you to read between the lines of what I'm about to tell you. They're privately run businesses that deliver NHS funded services under regulation by the Care Quality Commission, which means what gets offered to you as a patient depends on funding pathways, not patient need. So during COVID, funding was completely redirected to urgent emergency care, rightly so. Anything that was considered non-emergency, non-urgent, too time heavy with a low reimbursement was quietly dropped. And earwax removal was right in the middle of that category. However, with that being said, some surgeries offered this and continued to offer the service years after the funding was dropped. Most of these would have been the smaller village GP surgeries that could absorb some of that cost, and they still had staff that were willing to do it. But as pressures have increased, time has decreased, and funding has decreased, and everything like expenses have gone up, these have slowly vanished too. They basically, as a business, can't justify it anymore. So what we found is that the earwax removal is on a funding pathway. It was initially on a funding pathway. So if you were to choose which funding pathway you were on as a GP surgery, the higher funded pathway didn't contain earwax removal, and the lower funding pathway did contain earwax removal as a treatment option that you would get some reimbursement for. But obviously, again, if you're running a business, you want your funding to be as high as possible because it's a business. So those that could no longer afford to absorb the costs of the lower funding pathway have transitioned to the higher funding pathway, where treatment for earwax removal and thus alike are no longer offered because they're not being paid for it, not because the treatment's unsafe. Basically, if a service is not profitable and it takes too long or isn't funded properly, the GP surgery is going to stop offering it. Not because the treatment doesn't matter, but because the ecosystem doesn't support it anymore. The government doesn't support it anymore. So basically, earwax removal didn't disappear. Well, it sort of did. It was secretly and quietly pushed out of the NHS, out of the back door. And it was a problem left for someone else to solve.